Putting aside yet another abysmally underwhelming performance from Arne Slot's Liverpool, which saw them draw their fourth consecutive Premier League game in a 1-1 result at home to Burnley, there was at least one clear positive to take from the match, and that was Florian Wirtz. In a team that once again looked slow, predictable, and tactically restrained, Wirtz was one of the few players who not only played well on the day, but has also quietly been Liverpool's most consistently impressive performer across recent games. After an initial adjustment period, roughly half a season at this point, with the league now 22 games in, where we saw flashes of his quality mixed with understandable inconsistency, Florian Wirtz has now properly arrived at Liverpool, and over the last few weeks, he has begun to demonstrate exactly why the club were willing to spend £116 million to bring him in. Earlier in the season, the talent was obvious, but the impact wasn't always there on a game-to-game basis. There were moments of brilliance, clever touches between the lines, sharp turns under pressure, but they often came in isolation. Now, that influence has become sustained. Over Liverpool's last run of games, Wirtz hasn't just looked good aesthetically, he's begun to control matches. His dribbling, his link-up play, and his ability to manipulate space in advanced areas are now being applied consistently, not sporadically. And crucially, that influence is finally being reflected in tangible output. Across his last 7 matches, Wirtz has registered 6 goal contributions, 4 goals and 2 assists, with an average SofaScore rating of 7.7. While ratings are never the full story, they do act as a useful indicator, and in this case, they reinforce what the eye test already tells us. Wirtz is Liverpool's creative reference point right now, even in a system that often limits attacking fluidity rather than enhancing it. Those goals have come against Wolves, Fulham, Barnsley and Burnley, with assists against Spurs and Barnsley. And in today's match against Burnley specifically, particularly in the first half, Wirtz was clearly the player pulling the strings. We all know about his technical security, his ability to retain the ball in tight spaces, to receive on the half-turn under pressure, and to glide away from markers has been evident since his Leverkusen days. But in this match, it went beyond neat touches and tidy combinations. He was actively dictating the tempo in advanced areas. There was a sequence in the second half that perfectly encapsulated his current level. Wirtz beat 2, possibly 3 Burnley players in quick succession before slipping a perfectly weighted pass through to Gakpo. It should have been the moment that made it 2-0 and killed the game. Instead, the chance went begging, and Liverpool later conceded to settle for yet another draw. And this is where a lot of the frustration around Wirtz earlier in the season comes into context. For much of the campaign, even when criticism was loudest, Wirtz was still playing reasonably well. The difference between the criticism then and the praise now largely comes down to goal contributions. Missed chances from himself and his teammates, including moments like the Gakpo opportunity today, have directly impacted how his performances have been perceived. Modern football analysis is brutally output-driven. For many viewers, the difference between a good and a bad game begins and ends with whether a player scores or assists. So while some of the criticism earlier in the season was justified due to inconsistency, it is also true that Wirtz was creating opportunities that simply weren't being converted, which unfairly dragged down his perceived impact. That's why his goal today felt so significant. Earlier in the season, one of the most frustrating aspects of his game was his finishing. He was finding himself in good positions, but his shots often lacked conviction, drifting wide or being struck too tamely. This time, there was no hesitation, no overthinking. He simply smashed the ball into the top left corner with authority. It was decisive, confident, and symbolic of a player who now believes he belongs at this level. There is a fundamental difference in football between players who look good because of a system and players who look good because they are genuinely elite talents. Wirtz firmly falls into the latter category. He is performing well in spite of Slot's pragmatic, slow, and often uninspiring setup. A setup that has seen Liverpool win just 5 of their last 17 Premier League games, despite being technically unbeaten across 12 matches in all competitions, a run that includes 6 wins and 6 draws. The structure may be restrictive, but Wirtz's quality still shines through. The same can be said for Ekitike. These are players whose talent remains visible, regardless of coaching limitations. In an ideal world, this video would have been framed around a convincing home win against 19th place Burnley, with Wirtz's goal and performance being the central narrative. Instead, it comes with the caveat of yet another frustrating draw. But that doesn't diminish the point. This video needed to be made because Florian Wirtz has, quietly but decisively, silenced many of his doubters. Those who questioned whether he could justify his price tag, or whether he could translate his Bundesliga form into the Premier League, are now beginning to see the full picture. And to finish, just take a look at his season heatmap. It tells you everything. Wirtz is everywhere. He drifts laterally, drops deep to receive, pushes high to press, and constantly occupies different pockets of space. That unpredictability is exactly what makes him such a nightmare for defenders, and such a rare profile in a Liverpool side that otherwise feels rigid and predictable. At just 22 years old, Liverpool don't just have a luxury player, they have a genuine reference point for the future. The challenge now is whether the system around him will ever truly allow him to flourish at his absolute peak.